When I was 17, I was a drinker and a smoker and an unhappy optimist. I was an honors student, working part-time with an early admissions acceptance to my first-choice university. I was fiercely independent, and I moved out of my mother's toxic household senior year, just shy of 18. I loved to drink. I loved to smoke. I loved to write. I was so full of hope for my future. I truly thought that hope was enough to lift me out of the hazy darkness of depression that I had been floating in and out of for years. When I met him, I had never had a serious relationship in my life. I had only ever experienced rejection, most of which was the result of letting intense insecurity prevent me from ever really putting myself out there. He pursued me, and I denied him. He pursued me again, and I denied him. My old Honda needed brakes, among many other problems. I was in school working part-time with no financial help. He offered to fix my car for free. I started entertaining him first with my time, then with my number. He took me to bars in the city. Imagine, a 17-year-old, from a boring suburban town, who loved to drink, bar hopping in the city. Talk about a dream come true. He was juggling 2 women when we started talking. One of them was a long-term relationship, the other was a short fling who ended up pregnant. She gave birth about 6 months into us talking, and left with the baby, cutting him off completely. Talk about red fucking flags. The love bombing phase would be turned on and off throughout the entirety of our relationship, getting shorter and shorter as the years dragged on. The manipulation started immediately. From those first phone calls where he rushed into saying, "I love you," while he was in another city entertaining 2 different relationships. When I would express hesitation and doubt, he would pick a small fight. He would guilt trip, hang up, tell me he's through with me. They feed you with affection, compliments, and praise so that they can starve you from it later. Despite all the warning signs, despite the fact that I wasn't even initially interested at all, I didn't want that to lose that attention. I was so young and insecure and lost. He filled me the same way the alcohol did, with a numb break from a harsh reality, but he was even more poisonous. By the time my freshman year of college came around, I was sucked in deep. My drinking phase was nearly over. He was the only self-destructive habit I couldn't seem to shake. I spent almost every weekend taking the train up north to visit him. I skipped class to stay longer. I missed out on friendships and experiences. He was clingy, controlling, overbearing, mentally, verbally, and sometimes physically abusive. And I ran to him. Every single time. I caught him on dating sites more times than I can count. I would log into his accounts, read the messages he would send other women while right next to me. I found his inbox cluttered with nude photos he would receive and send. One time, he started a long-distance relationship with this girl from Florida. They had never met, but he would talk to her every day. She didn't only send him nudes, she would also send pictures of her nails she just got done and random updates about her day. When I found out, I called her. She told me I was lying, that they were dating and he wasn't with me. She didn't believe me until I called him on 3-way, and he pathetically admitted to lying to us both. That's how powerfully manipulative and deceiving narcissists can be. He had this girl, who didn't even know him, wrapped around his finger from 1,000 miles away. This infidelity and disloyalty is just the tip of the iceberg. The stories could go on for days, like the time he held me down and slapped me as a joke, and barely reacted to the tears that followed, or the subtle ways he would tear down my self-esteem, the persistent threats, all to make sure I lived in a constant state of insecurity and fear. He punched me while I was driving once, and grabbed the steering wheel a few times during arguments. If I tried to count the number of times I went to bed crying, it would be a few hundred at least. I tried to get away so many times. If you've never experienced a relationship with a person who has narcissistic personality disorder, then by this point you are questioning my own sanity. Why the hell did she stay? He would cycle through kindness and cruelty effortlessly. This cycle causes trauma bonding, and anybody who downplays the power of this phenomenon doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about. We separated several times. He would harass me. One time he came to my apartment in the middle of the night and threw rocks at my window for hours until I let him in. Sure, I could have called the cops. Maybe if I hadn't already spent years being conditioned by his abuse and living in fear of his reactions, I would have. The point is, I didn't. I would confront him, push him away, block his number, and tell him I was absolutely done. But I had no confidence. I had become dependent on him for everything from validating my worth to fixing my car. I would always rationalize the choice to let him back in. I wouldn't tell anyone we were together. I would tell myself as soon as I graduated and had a better job and didn't need his help for anything, then I'd finally be able to be done. They were excuses, because I didn't know any better. I didn't know about narcissism and trauma bonding and hoovering. I didn't love myself enough to be capable of acknowledging that I didn't deserve or cause this. 6 years into this chaos, I got pregnant. At the beginning of that summer, we separated with no contact. In true narcissistic fashion, he jumped headfirst into another relationship the moment I bailed. He called me to tell me she was so much hotter than I was and to remind me how ugly, fat, and worthless he thought I was. She was pregnant by the end of the summer and wasn't able to keep the baby. I found out about her pregnancy shortly after I found out about my own. It was one of the worst periods of my life. We had briefly reconnected at the end of that summer, but I had no intention of ever being with him again. I can look back and see the reason I entertained him long enough to have sex again was because I hadn't even come close to beginning the deep process of healing. I was still seeking his validation. I was 22 and a pregnant college dropout. I had never experienced a healthy relationship in my life. My father passed away when I was 13, and I had no relationship with my mother. My sister was the only real family I had. She was a teen mom, and she has 4 kids now. I've watched her struggle and transform into a selfless, loving mother. Her kids saved her life, but I didn't want that same life of hardship. I always wanted to be a mother. I knew I would have a daughter. But I worked so hard putting myself through school so that I could bring a baby into a life of stability. I wanted a good job and a good partner and good life. It is through this that I learned about divine timing. When I first found out, I cried for a week straight. I told myself that if I ever got pregnant by him, I would have to get an abortion. There was no way I could bring a child into this world with him as their father. I didn't want that for my baby. I had no stability. I had no financial security. I had nothing. For that week, I cried every time I saw a baby. I cried every time a sad song came on the radio. I told my best friend, roommate at the time, and no one else. Then, one day I was on the phone with my sister, who I had intentionally decided to hide this pregnancy from. I knew she would hurt for me, and I didn't want her to know until after the abortion was done. Out of nowhere, she started talking about how she was having baby fever, and since she's done having kids, she wished she could fast forward time to when I would have my own. I didn't say anything, and we got off the phone shortly after. An hour later I called her back. I cried to her and told her everything. She was so calm. When I told her I had to get an abortion, and this was the worst thing that ever happened to me, she told me everything would be fine. I decided a few days later that I was keeping my baby. I ordered a big bottle of plant-based prenatal vitamins, and I didn't cry for the rest of my pregnancy, except for a couple hormonal breakdowns near the 9-month mark. My daughter is my earth angel. She is my endless source of strength and inspiration. I stayed with my narcissist until my daughter turned 1. He, just barely, financially supported us that first year. I wanted to stay home with her and exclusively breastfeed, and although he put me through hell, it's the one gift he ever gave me. After living together for the first time, and watching how his daughter's presence wasn't enough to initiate true change, I was finally done. I started researching narcissistic personality disorder, and all the pieces fit together like a picture-perfect puzzle. I started practicing the Grey Rock method. We were evicted from our apartment, blessing in disguise, and I continued the process of untangling myself from his twisted web. Eventually, he left. He went back to his mother's house. He's went on to have other relationships. He eventually stopped calling and sending money for our daughter. I haven't spoken to him in months. My heart hurts for her, but I know whatever struggle she'll face with an absent father does not compare to the pain and the wreckage he would have caused as a present figure in our lives. My baby girl is brilliant and kind and strong. Before she got here, I used to feel like my narcissist wasted years of my life. Now that I'm on the other side, I can see the bigger picture. I'm better because of what he put me through. I am so well informed. I am so full of love and respect for myself, and nobody will ever hold the power to take that away from me ever again. And now I have the insight to help others find this light, too. If every single agonizing moment gave me the tools necessary to help my daughter lead a better, happier life, then I would go through it all again, 100 times over. As long as you're breathing, there is hope. You are worthy of everything good in this life. This journey will be a lifelong process. I'm still picking up the pieces, getting my shit together, and navigating this life as a single mama. I have learned so much. Of these few things I'm absolutely sure: there's power in education. There's power in community. And there's power in love. For yourself. For others. For the universe that delivers the hardest lessons and then gifts us the most extraordinary blessings. I am eternally grateful.